Welcome to day one of your React journey. In this course, we are going to dive deep into the world of React, a powerful and popular JavaScript library for building user interfaces. Whether you're here to build modern interactive websites or start your path toward becoming a front-end expert, you're in the right place. Before we begin, what are the prerequisites? So, what you need to have a basic understanding of is JavaScript. You should be familiar with concepts like variables, functions, especially callback functions, objects, arrays, and how JavaScript works on a basic level. Then you should also have a basic understanding of HTML and CSS. We'll write code that combines React with HTML-like syntax called JSX. So it's important to understand how HTML structures a web page and how CSS is used to style it. You don't have to be an expert in it, but the syntax should make sense. Now you might be wondering, what is React? So React is an open source JavaScript library developed by Facebook designed to help developers build fast and scalable user interfaces. React is all about components, small, reusable pieces of code that can be combined to build complex interfaces. You can think of React component as a Lego block. Individually, simple. But when you piece them together, you can build anything from a simple to-do app to a full-blown web application. Now, as a part of our today's content, we will understand what is Node.js, what is Node Package Manager, what is NPX, how do we install it on our machine if it's not already available. Then we will install the IDE that we will be using throughout this course, which is VS Code, and we will understand Create React Application in depth. You might be wondering what CRA or Create React App is. So it's an officially supported tool provided by the React team that allows developers to quickly set up a new React project with a pre-configured environment. It is designed to make the process of starting a React project as simple and streamlined as possible. We will go into much more detail of the folder structure that gets generated out of Create React application after we do the necessary steps of Node installation and VS Code installation. Please feel free to skip to the appropriate section if you think you already have Node.js and VS Code installed, and we can directly jump into the Create React. By the end of this tutorial, you will have a working React application and a good understanding of how Create React Apps simplifies the setup process, allowing you to focus on building your project. Let's get started. So on my screen, you can see the homepage for React, and current version is React 18.3.1. But before we dive into React, there are a few prerequisites that we need to install and set up. First of them would be Node.js. Node.js is a JavaScript runtime, and while it is often used for server-side development, in this case, we are only using it to manage packages for our React project. Node Package Manager, or NPM as we call it, comes bundled with Node.js, and it is crucial for installing and managing libraries and dependencies in our React project. To install Node.js, go to the nodejs.org, as you can see here, and you can download the LTS version. If you already have it installed, any version above 20 would be fine. You don't have to reinstall it. For people who do not have it installed, go ahead and install the Node.js from here. After this, the next is IDE, or Integrated Development Environment, that we will be using to write our code. In case you already have VS Code installed, we should be good. Even though you can use any text editor or IDE, I would recommend using Visual Studio Code to ensure that we are all in sync when we are working on this particular course together. This is the site for VS Code, code.visualstudio.com. VS Code is a free, lightweight, and very powerful code editor that supports extensions for JavaScript, React, and many other technologies, as you can see. You can code in all of these languages and it supports them out of the box. It provides features like IntelliSense, built-in Git support, so you can check in your code without moving away from IDE that you're working on, and lots of debugging tools, making it perfect for our React development. If you do not have it installed, head over to this website, code.visualstudio.com, and you can download it for your operating system. Once you have installed VS Code, we can install some additional plugins to enhance it for the React workflow that we'll be going with. But this is something that I will cover as a part of the section when we reach our application development, not something that's immediate. So in case you do not have these installed, Node.js and Visual Studio Code, please pause the video, go ahead and install them, and then resume. Now, assuming that you have installed Node.js and Visual Studio Code correctly, first we would have to check whether Node.js was installed correctly on your machine or not. To check this, please head over to your command prompt or terminal if you're on a Mac and type these commands. So this should tell you the version of Node that you have installed, node-v. Node is now recognized as a global command, and -v tells you about the version. That means the installation for Node was successful. Similarly, you can check the Node package manager version that is installed on your machine. And here the command is npm-v, and it tells you that, okay, for me, 9.6.2 is installed. For me, personally, since I already had it installed, I did not update the version to the one that we saw in the course, which is 20.17.0. But if you have installed it very recently, it should show you the same version that you downloaded it for. Now, what is Node registry? So we talked about NPM, how we would need to set up our project. But what exactly is a package manager and a registry? So the NPM registry, this is the homepage for NPM registry, which is npmjs.com. It's a massive database of JavaScript packages. When you use npm to install a package, you're pulling it from this centralized registry. Whether you need utilities, front-end libraries like React, or even entire frameworks, the registry has everything for you. And as we saw at the beginning of our course, the current version of React is 18.3.1. Here, if we search for React, you would see that 18.3.1 is available as a part of this registry. Here it is, and it can be installed using npm I React. I stands as a short form for install. So you're instructing npm to install React. When you run this command, it reaches out to the registry, downloads the respective packages, and unpacks it for you in your Node Modules folder. And that's how the entire development cycle and the projects and dependencies will get added to your projects. So even though I mentioned that we can install dependencies using npm, there is another thing which you would see from time to time. You would hear npx as well. So npx, as you can see in the documentation, it can run a command from a local or remote npm package. So to run any package, you don't need to install it globally or even locally. You can use this command npx, mention the package that you want to run for the time being, pass in the required arguments, and this will download the package temporarily, execute it, complete the process, and then remove the package from your system. So that way you do not have the need to install everything globally. Now, this is the command npx that we will use to run the create React app without having to install it globally. And this will scaffold a new React project for us. So now, as we are done with our system setup, let's jump right in and go into create React app. Before we start developing the application, have a look at the homepage of the create React app. It helps you set up a modern web app by running just one command. Here on my screen, you can see the create React app homepage. And here, what we are going to do, we will get started. This is the command that you need to run to start your own React project. And here, as you can see, they are using npx command, which we just talked about. This will install create React app temporarily on your machine, run it, create your application, and then this will be removed. So this removes the need to install it at a global level. Now let's go to our folder and run this command. Here I am. This is a new empty folder that I've created. As you can see, it's in the D drive called project. What do we need to do here? We can create projects in multiple ways. But the essence of this is this command needs to be run as a part of your command line or terminal. I would go into my folder and open a new command window here. So now, as you can see, D project has this command window open. In here, I would start typing now. What do we need to do? We just saw that we copied the command. So it was npx create React app. By default, if you're running this command for the first time, it would always use the latest version which is available. But if you want it to be very explicit, you can add @latest. So @latest will always ensure the latest available version of create React app is used to create your React application. In here, After these two, you need to provide the name of your project. Create a to-dos application, to-dos app. After this, you can press enter and it will start to create the React application for you. Here, as soon as we press enter, you can see in the logs, it will create a new folder and start installing the required dependencies inside that. It's installing React, React DOM, React scripts with the create React app template. The CRA template is create React app template. Let's get into the understanding of what is create React app. Create React app is a widely used tool that automates the setup of a new React project. It handles a lot of the tedious setup like configuring Babel, Webpack, ESLint. If you're using a TypeScript template, it will configure the tsconfig with one command. It generates a fully working React project, the essential configuration in place. After running this, we don't have to worry about setting up these tools manually. Everything is done for us. Here you can see, please read through the commands before we start our project. So here it tells you that it created a git commit. It created a to-dos app at the folder. Inside this directory, we can run all these commands. npm start, this will start the development server. npm run build will bundle your app into a static file for production deployment. npm test will start the test runner. In case you're not aware of test runners, you have not used unit testing on your project, do not worry about it. Please let me know. We can create another small course to go through that in detail. But for now, in case you have not done unit testing, please do not worry about npm test. Now npm run eject, as we can see. Now this is a command that you might not use in a day-to-day life, but for certain projects which require a lot of custom configuration and you have to add some additional things which are not there out of the box in a create react app, you can run this command npm run eject and it will remove the tool and copies all the build dependencies, configuration files and scripts into the app directory as it calls out. If we do this, we can't go back. You will see all the configuration that goes into creating this React application. You will be able to play with that. But for now, let's not worry about it. We will start with typing cd to-dos app, the name of your project that you just created. We are changing the directory to that to-dos app. And here you can run npm start. Once you run npm start, it would open up your development server in the localhost 3000, as you can see. And here you can see edit source app.js to save and reload. So automatically when you make any changes in this particular file, it will reload your application. Let's try that out. Let's go to our application. Now in here, if you're on a Windows machine, you can just press Shift key to bring the additional options. And here you can see open with code option is there. You can directly open it. Once the project opens, you will see this. It's just a security warning. So since this is a project that has been created using Create React app and you are the owner, you can trust the authors. And this opens up the project for you. And here is the app.js that we were talking about. Let's go through the folder structure first. The folder structure that we see here is Node Modules. This will have all the Node packages that are needed to run your application. And here you can see it's a lot more than what you thought it would be. So this is what Create React App does out of the box. It installs all these dependencies. It has some additional tools. So all of these might not be needed for a plain React project, but for the tooling, the linting and everything is set up for you. The second folder is the public folder. In Create React App, the public folder plays a very crucial role in hosting static assets and serving the HTML entry point for your React application. The key functions of public folder are it hosts the static files. Any file that we place in public folder will be served as is by the web server. So if we are in need of logo 192, logo 152, these are different sizes of logo that have been placed in, and they'll be served as is when we are referencing them on the page. It will be available as a static URL. Now the main or the entry point of our application, which is public index.html, it's the only HTML file in our application. And React injects the JavaScript into this file. This file includes this particular div with ID root, and our entire React application gets rendered here. As you can see that this references some of the assets directly. As we saw, logo 192 is referenced directly using this public URL. And in the comment, it clearly calls out that notice the use of public URL in the tags above. It will be replaced with the URL of the public folder during the build. Only files inside public folder can be referenced from HTML. Now this also has this manifest.json. This file provides metadata for progressive web applications. If you have not worked with web applications a lot, perfectly fine. Let me know. We can cover progressive web apps in a separate content altogether. But it basically describes how our app should behave when installed on a user's device. Where the fab icon is coming from, logo, what's the size of the logo, is it a standalone or not, what is the background color, the theme color, and other things. And then robots.txt. Robots.txt is used to control how search engine or crawlers index your site. Now, even though we can use a static folder to serve the images as is, in most of the cases, you would still want to place some of your logos and other things inside your source folder because these assets are optimized and bundled by Webpack. So the public folder should be reserved for files that we don't want to be processed by Webpack, like externally managed assets. But remaining everything, or most of the things, we should try to put as a part of our source directory. Now up next is our source directory. So let me close this one and we'll jump right in. Now, in order to go through the source of our application, I will use this split view so that we can make code changes in real time and get the feedback as well. I'll also close any of the tabs that we are not using anymore. And here we go. In a Create React App project, the source folder or the SRC folder is the heart of our application. It contains all the source code and logic that is compiled and bundled into the final output. Let's break down all the files and go through them one by one. The first file that we will go through is the app.js. App.js is the main component of the React application. It defines the structure of the interface that we see right now on our screen. It also depends on some other files, like we have this logo coming from logo.svg. As we discussed, it's not a part of public folder and it's something that will be managed by Webpack during build. So it's logo.svg, which we are importing and imports app.css. So create React app gives you support to add CSS onto your components out of the box. You can go ahead, create a CSS file, import it in your component, and as long as you're using the same classes, you will see the appropriate style applied onto your screen. Just to validate that, what we will do, we will update one of the styles and see if that reflects. First, we will see what's the class that's applied to this link. This is Learn React. And here in our component, on line number 18, you can see this text is available. The class name associated with this is AppLink. We'll go to our app.css and this is the AppLink class. Now in this, I will just increase the font size to 8 rem and see how big it gets. It's huge. The CSS is linked to our app.js file and also does not require us to reload the page in case anything changes. The hot reload is working as expected. Whenever you change anything, it automatically reflects. And if I remove that change, save the file once again, it goes back to its previous state. And the same thing will happen if we change any content onto our application. For example, if I want to get rid of this image, which is rotating, I can go ahead and delete that and save it. Here we see the image is completely gone. And the next important file that we see is index.js. This is the entry point for our React application. It imports the app component or the only component that we have in our application right now. It renders it inside the HTML element with the ID root, which we saw in our public folder. This one. This is the index.html and this is the div ID root. And this file, index.js, checks the get element by ID root. Once that div is identified in the index.html, it creates that as the root node of your React DOM and then renders the application inside that. The next file is index.css, which is same as app.css, but it's for our global styles. So this file contains all the global CSS styles that we want to apply to entire application. Right now, as you can see, It has some of these styles where body's margin is set to 0, default font family is configured along with some font smoothing. And for the code blocks, it applies a different font family. And these are the global styles that will be applied to our entire application. Now we come to app.test.js. This is the default testing file, which is set up to run tests on the app component. It uses Jest, which comes bundled with Create React App to run unit tests. As I mentioned, if you have not worked with unit testing before, please do not worry about it. This is something that we will cover as a part of our React section or unit testing section in much more detail. Logo.svg is the default React logo displayed in the app. It's imported as a React component in app.js and is rendered within app component. The SVG file format is supported out of the box, allowing you to easily include and render any vector graphics. Now we have setup.tests. This is automatically set up to configure the global Jest settings in your application. When your application expands, you would have certain globals which you would have to mark some boilerplate code for where before running Jest, and all of that can be done here. Now, as we see that all our components that are created can directly import CSS, and that is because Create React App comes with a built-in support for importing and using CSS files in our project. There is no need to configure Webpack, Babel to handle CSS files manually. We can simply import CSS files in our JavaScript components and start using them. Global CSS we can put inside our index.css files. Then component level CSS file, usually there is one file per component or on as needed basis. Sometimes if you're using libraries like Bootstrap or Tailwind, you might not need any CSS at all because everything would be there in the components by default, and you can use custom classes that come out of the box for those libraries. This also supports CSS module. You might ask, what is CSS module? As we can see in this code, let me undo some of the changes that I did. I'll re-import this logo, save it so that it comes up again. Yes. What are CSS modules? For more modular and scoped styles, where styles are only applied to a specific component and cannot leak out of your component, we can rename the CSS files to your component name .module.css and import them in our components. To showcase that, what I would do, I would create or duplicate the same component app.js and rename it. So I'll rename second component .js, and this second component function second component export default second component. And in this, I do not want anything apart from my app link. Another developer creates a new link, secondary link in another component. He created this link and added this link as a part of our app.js or inside your any other component, for example. But for just for the sake of simplicity, what we will do, we will use the second component directly. I will import that, I will render that and save it. And we see secondary link in another component comes up. Now, as a part of our app.css, what I'm going to do, I will change the font size to see if Learn React can capture focus a little more. What I would do is I would increase the font size to 4 rems. If I save it, oh, what happened? So it not only impacted this style, but since both of the components are using the same style, I ran into an issue where my secondary link also got impacted, and the outcome that I was hoping for did not come up. Now to see how modules work, what we'll do is we'll duplicate this app.css file, rename it now. Rename it to your component name .module.css. And since our component name is second component .module.css is the file name. I will remove everything and just have this app link because this is the only class ideally that should be there in our component. We are not dealing with anything else. And in this second component, now I will import the sheet. So I'll write import styles from part to your file, which is second component.module.css. And now this styles will give you unique class name, which is generated based on the form, your file name or component name, underscore the class name and underscore a unique hash. To showcase that, I will log this console.log styles. I will go ahead, inspect it. In case you're new to web development, anything that we log here, you will be able to see that in console. I've inspected and I see. So AppLink is the class that gets generated. So if I use styles.AppLink, you see the class name, the unique class name that gets generated is based on your file name, which is second component underscore your class name underscore a unique hash that will not repeat for another component. And here to use this particular class name, what I would do, since this is a JSX and JSX is JavaScript XML markup, it allows us to use JavaScript objects inside our HTML or the markup that we are sending. Since app link is a object that has a dash in between, how I would use it is app link. Save it. Now, if I go here, I remove this and save it, we can see that the style that was applied to app link, even though in our CSS file we still have that app link, does not impact the secondary link that is coming from our component. And that is because if I inspect this component, now the class that is assigned to this is a unique class which is generated from the CSS module file. And that's why CSS modules are important and are supported out of the box in Create React application. Now we will come back to our index.js file. And here, I just wanted to briefly talk over this React.strict mode. What is it and what do you need to know about it? It's something that we won't go into too much detail in, but it's good to have an understanding of this. So React strict mode is a development tool used to highlight potential problem in your React application. It does not render anything to the UI. So as you can see, it's wrapping our app component, but you do not see any other content on the page apart from the content of your application. So it doesn't render anything on the UI or affect the production build. But what it will do, it will help you write better code during development. And how does it do that? It detects unsafe life cycles. It warns about lifecycle methods that might not be safe to use in React versions. It would help you identify the side effects. It helps detect any side effect that might occur during rendering or re-rendering. And it also detects legacy API warnings. So it tells you about deprecated APIs or code patterns that could break in future. This also helps to ensure that your application is ready for concurrent rendering, which is a new rendering approach that React is moving toward. Something that we can cover in much more detail in our React section. Please let me know if you would like to go through that, but not something that I would dive deep into right now. But yes, so this was the summary of our source folder. It has your app.js, which is the main component, your index.js, which is the entry point for the application, rendering the React component into the DOM in your root div. Your app.css and index.css, these are the CSS files to control your component and global stylings. There is app.test.js for unit testing your app component. You have your logo, which is the rotating logo that you see. It's an SVG, which is supported out of the box. And then you have test setups. This marks the completion of your application that was generated using Create React. And just before I close, I would also want to showcase you this package.json file. This package.json file tells you all the scripts which we saw in the beginning of the project when we were generating our application. It supports npm start, npm run build, npm test, and npm run eject. It also mentions the dependencies that we are using as a part of our application: React, React DOM, React scripts, and Web Vitals. So one thing which we missed is React report Web Vitals file. So the report Web Vitals function, which you can see here, it's a function that gets generated out of the box in Create React app and is used to measure and report the Web Vitals, which are performance metrics for the application that you're running or the experience that you're designing. If you are new to web development and starting right now on React, you might want to understand what are Web Vitals. Without causing too much confusion, I would say these are key metrics that are commonly referred to as core Web Vitals. If you're new to web development, I would not worry about this file too much. But in case you're really interested, please let me know so that I can cover the Web Vitals topics separately. It's something that impacts all the web applications that we develop, and we can go into much more details. And it's a big topic in itself. I would not want to go too deep into this right now. But yes, Great job. We have our first working application using Create React App. This gives you the ability to directly go in and start writing React components and creating application. Now in our next session, what we will do is we will start to work on the to-do application that we have created. We will restructure it a little bit more, try to put the components in their right places, and scale it up to see if we can create a to-do application which is actually useful. The application that we will create will not be integrated onto any backend API. That's something that we will take up later. But just by completing this course, you will get a better understanding of how React applications are structured, how you can think about breaking down your application into multiple smaller components, and how those components come together to bring an experience onto the page which is actually useful to the end user. There would be many more things in our next implementation. Can't wait to see you there. Thank you so much.